And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. Story number 1.
Ever since I met Laura, I always believed that a bond built on trust was unbreakable. We had been the envy of our circle, with our tales of love lasting over 2 decades. Little did I know that a simple envelope would shatter that belief. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind that paints the trees with a fiery hue, and the wind carries secrets. As I walked towards my home after a long day at work, I noticed a stark white envelope lying in our mailbox. No stamp, no address, just a simple handwritten mark on the front. Curiosity got the better of me, and I swiftly tore it open. The letter inside was typed, and the words sent chills down my spine. "Open your eyes, Mark. Love can blind, but the truth can hurt even more. Laura isn't as faithful as you think." I felt my heart skip a beat. Laura? My Laura? Cheating on me? No, it can't be. We had spent more than 20 years together, sharing not just a home, but dreams, hopes, secrets, and every imaginable emotion. This had to be a sick joke, but who would do such a thing? And why? I looked around, half expecting to see a pair of sneering eyes watching me from the shadows, enjoying the aftermath of their cruel prank. But the street was quiet, with just the rustling leaves and my racing heartbeat breaking the silence. I hid the letter in my briefcase, deciding not to share it with Laura just yet. Instead, I resolved to keep an eye on her, to watch for signs that could confirm or refute this terrible accusation. I believed in her, in us. Yet, there was this gnawing feeling at the pit of my stomach, like a worm eating away at the apple of our love. Over the next few days, everything seemed normal. Laura was her usual chirpy self, filling our home with her laughter and love. But then I noticed it. Robert, our close friend for years, a man I'd shared countless memories with, was around more than usual. At first, I dismissed it as mere coincidence, but the signs started to add up. The stolen glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, the hushed conversations that ceased when I entered a room, the secret smiles that hinted at shared secrets. I wanted to confront her, to ask her outright, but every time I mustered the courage, she'd look at me with those same eyes filled with love, and my doubts would melt away. But the envelope's message remained, lurking in the shadows, reminding me that sometimes, what seems too good to be true usually is. Days turned into weeks, and the gnawing suspicion inside me continued to grow. Each interaction between Laura and Robert became magnified, every whisper echoing loudly in my mind, every touch sending electric shocks down my spine. The world around me started to shift, with doubt clouding every beautiful memory we'd built. I had always been a man of action, so I decided to dive deeper. I began keeping track of Laura's movements, something I never imagined I'd ever do. I made notes of the times she'd take calls outside, her sudden late-night outings, and those weekend get-togethers with girlfriends that I'd never heard of. My journal started filling up with these observations, but it wasn't just notes, it was a testament to a crumbling foundation. One day, as I was making another entry, I stumbled upon a receipt from a fancy restaurant. The date was from one of those nights Laura had claimed to have a girls' night out. But what caught my attention was the total, far too high for just one person. My heart raced as I recalled her coming home that night, her makeup slightly smudged and her demeanor slightly off. With the receipt as my cue, I decided to dig deeper. I turned to technology for help. I installed a discreet tracking app on Laura's phone. The sinking feeling of betraying her trust was overwhelmed by the burning need to know the truth. And soon, the app gave me exactly what I was looking for. The locations she frequented matched Robert's. They were together at parks, cafes, and even, on one occasion, a secluded lakeside cabin. One evening, after another late night at work, I confronted Laura. Her face turned ashen as I listed my observations, my voice trembling, barely concealing the heartbreak. But to my surprise, she laughed. A forced, nervous laugh. She accused me of being paranoid, questioning my trust in our love and reminding me of our years together. "Mark," she said, looking straight into my eyes, "you're seeing shadows where there are none. Her gaslighting began to make me question everything. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe all this was just a figment of my overactive imagination. But then, a ray of hope, or perhaps despair, came from the most unexpected source. Robert's wife, Emily. She called me one morning, her voice trembling. She too had found signs, hints, and whispers of betrayal. She too had been dismissed, laughed at, and accused of being delusional. We were two souls, broken by the same deceit, seeking answers in a world that seemed to be shifting under our feet. Together, we decided to find undeniable proof and confront the liars that had torn our worlds apart. The hunt was on, and the stakes had never been higher. It was on one of those cool, foggy mornings that I found solace in our town's park. The mist clung to the trees, and the world felt muffled, like a scene straight out of a dream. As I walked down the familiar paths, each step seemed to echo with memories of happier times, back when doubt and heartbreak were foreign concepts. Amidst the silence, I heard a familiar voice call out to me, "Mark!" Turning around, I saw Jane, a mutual friend of Laura's and mine. With her sun-kissed hair and always comforting smile, Jane had been an ever-present figure in our lives. She'd been there through our highs and lows, our joys and sorrows. She approached, her eyes showing a hint of concern. "You look like you've seen better days," she remarked gently. We sat on a nearby bench, the cold metal, a stark contrast to the warmth of memories associated with this place. With a deep breath, I spilled everything. The letter, the tracking, the confrontation, and the alliance with Emily. As I narrated, I could see a mixture of sympathy and concern in Jane's eyes. When I finished, there was a heavy pause, the weight of my revelations hanging in the air. After what felt like an eternity, Jane finally spoke, her voice filled with a sadness I had never heard before. "Mark," she began hesitatingly, "there's something I think you should know." She revealed that she had seen Laura and Robert together on multiple occasions over the past few months. They had been at cafes, malls, and even at Jane's own birthday party, always finding corners to whisper, share fleeting touches, and exchange looks filled with a secret intimacy. Jane hadn't thought much of it initially, assuming it was just close friendship. But as the instances grew, her own suspicions began to mount. She even recalled a particular evening when she caught them sharing a much too intimate moment in her garden. Jane's revelations were like a hammer to my already fragile heart, but what she said next was even more shattering. Robert was known to be manipulative. In the past, he had charmed and deceived others, leaving a trail of broken relationships in his wake. His modus operandi was always the same: befriend, charm, and then destroy. Laura wasn't his first victim, and if left unchecked, she wouldn't be his last. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness. But more than anything, I felt a sense of determination. With Jane's insights, Emily's support, and my own observations, I was building a case. A case not just against Robert, but against the shadows of doubt and deceit that had crept into my life. It was time to bring everything to light and confront the two people who had betrayed me the most. The storm was coming, and I was at its center. The following week, I meticulously planned the confrontation. With Jane and Emily's help, we arranged for a dinner at my house. The pretense was simple: a reunion of old friends, a gathering to reminisce and celebrate our shared history. Robert and Laura suspected nothing, or at least, they showed no signs of it. The evening started off pleasantly. The golden glow of the setting sun filtered through the curtains, and soft music played in the background. Laughter and chatter filled the room, creating an illusion of harmony. But beneath the surface, tension crackled like electricity. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I took the lead. With a deep breath, I began. Tonight isn't just about memories or celebrating friendship. It's about truth and confronting the shadows that have crept into our lives. The room went silent. Laura's face turned pale, and Robert shifted uncomfortably. I continued, laying out all the evidence, from the letter to Jane's revelations, from the tracking results to the emotional pain that their deceit had inflicted on Emily and me. The atmosphere was thick with emotion. Accusations flew, voices raised, tears flowed, and for the first time, the mask of deception started to crumble. Robert, in a desperate bid to deflect blame, tried to paint himself as the victim. He spoke of loneliness, of feeling unappreciated, and how Laura was a beacon of hope in his desolate life. Laura, on the other hand, seemed lost and confused. She alternated between expressing remorse and accusing me of smothering her with my insecurities. She admitted to being swayed by Robert's charm, but also expressed her frustration at feeling taken for granted in our relationship. Jane and Emily were my pillars of support. They countered every lie, every deflection, reminding Robert and Laura of the pain they had caused, the trust they had broken, and the lives they had torn apart. Hours seemed to pass. The room was a battleground of emotions, and the scars of betrayal were laid bare for all to see. By the end, as the first light of dawn started to peek through, one thing was clear. Relationships were forever altered. There was no going back, no healing the wounds. All that was left were the pieces of shattered trust and the daunting task of moving forward. As everyone left, the house was eerily silent, but it was also free from the chains of deceit. I sat alone, reflecting on the storm that had passed, feeling both drained and liberated. The confrontation had been painful, but it had also been necessary. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least now it was based on truth. In the wake of that tumultuous night, life took on an almost surreal quality. The town, once filled with fond memories, now bore the scars of betrayal at every turn. Whispers followed me wherever I went, some filled with sympathy, others with morbid curiosity. The first few days were a blur of pain and numbness. Emily and I leaned on each other, finding solace in shared anguish. Our meetings became frequent, and a unique bond began to form between us. It wasn't romantic, but rather an understanding, a mutual support system built on the ruins of deceit. Laura, overwhelmed by guilt, retreated from social life. She moved out, seeking solace in solitude, grappling with the consequences of her actions. From mutual friends, I learned she had started therapy, trying to find answers and perhaps a path to redemption. Robert, true to his manipulative nature, attempted to spin the story in his favor, painting himself as a misunderstood soul caught in the crossfire of emotions. But his charms had limits. With the truth out in the open, many began to see through his facade. He faced social ostracization and was even forced to step down from several community committees. About a month after the confrontation, I received a handwritten letter, its familiar script tugging at my heartstrings. It was from Laura. She wrote of her remorse, her realization of the depths of her betrayal, and the pain she had inflicted, not just on me, but on herself as well. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She merely wanted me to understand her side of the story, her loneliness in our relationship, her vulnerability, and how Robert had expertly exploited it. Reading the letter was an emotional roller coaster. Anger, pity, sadness, and love swirled inside me. While it didn't change the past or mend the broken bonds, it provided a perspective, a glimpse into the human frailty that led to the betrayal. The town, ever resilient, slowly started to heal. New stories replaced the old, and life resumed its pace. But for those of us at the heart of the storm, the journey was just beginning. Emily, finding strength in her pain, started a support group for individuals dealing with betrayal. It became her mission to help others navigate the treacherous waters of deceit and come out stronger. As for me, I turned to writing, pouring my emotions, my experiences, and my lessons into words. The journal that had once been a record of suspicion transformed into a memoir of healing. With Jane's encouragement, I even got it published. The book, titled Shadows of Deceit, became a local bestseller and resonated with many who had faced similar betrayals. The final chapter of my story was marked by a simple yet profound event. On the anniversary of the confrontation, I visited the same park where Jane had revealed the truth to me. Sitting on the familiar bench, I took out Laura's letter, reread it one last time, and then set it aflame. As the ashes floated away, carried by the gentle breeze, it symbolized my letting go, my release from the chains of the past, and my first step towards a future of healing and hope.
Story number 2.
Hey Reddit, John here. If someone told me a year ago that I'd be penning down this roller coaster of a story, I'd have laughed it off. But here we are. So, buckle up, because this one's wild. Now, to understand the depth of the situation, you've got to know how it all started. It was one of those classic rainy days in Edinburgh. You know, the type where the rain drizzles down, just lightly enough that it's almost romantic, but just heavy enough to warrant an umbrella. The streets had that fresh rain scent, and the cobblestones glistened with tiny puddles reflecting the gray sky. Most folks dashed about, but not me. I was in no hurry, completely engrossed in the beauty of the rain. I remember I was trying to take a picture of the castle from this particular angle when I bumped into someone. Looking down, I saw this girl, Olivia, on the ground. Her papers all scattered, her umbrella flipped inside out. But what caught my attention was her reaction. She was laughing. Not embarrassed or angry, just genuinely laughing at the mess we'd created. We got to talking, and there was this instant connection. It's crazy. It felt like I'd known her for ages. She had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to dance when she spoke, and a laugh that was so contagious, I found myself chuckling along even when nothing was particularly funny. Olivia was studying art history and had a deep love for Edinburgh's architecture. She showed me the city through her eyes that day, and I was utterly captivated, both by her and the stories she told. Our dates were straight out of a rom-com. Picnics in Princes Street gardens, late-night walks along the Royal Mile, sharing stories, dreams, and churros from that tiny stall near the Scottish National Gallery. It felt like fate had thrown us together. When I proposed only a few months later, under the twinkling fairy lights of Circus Lane, she said yes without hesitation. Our friends said we were mad, rushing things, but it felt right, you know? We were young, in love, and had dreams as vast as the sky. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, but brimming with genuine happiness. That beginning, it was like something out of a fairy tale. Little did I know that every story has its twists and turns. But that's for later. All right, Reddit, this is where the gut feeling started to creep in, even though I didn't fully realize it at the time. After the fairy tale start, life began settling into a sort of rhythm. We were newlyweds, figuring out how to live together, sharing our space and our lives. The fun part? Getting to know all of Olivia's friends. She had this close-knit group from college, and they'd meet every other week and I'd occasionally join in. There was this one friend of hers, Zara, who always stood out. Fiery redhead, incredibly sharp wit, and always seemed to have a protective aura around Olivia. One day, after one of those dinner get-togethers, I was helping clean up when Zara cornered me in the kitchen. She looked serious, almost concerned, and I remember thinking she was going to talk about some diet or kitchen hack. But no. She leaned in, and in a hushed tone that I could barely hear over the clamor of the party, she whispered, "John, Olivia isn't who you think she is." I blinked, taken aback. Was this some sort of joke? I chuckled awkwardly, trying to brush it off, thinking maybe this was some weird way of hers to break the ice. But the look on Zara's face was dead serious. She continued, "Just be careful, okay? Watch out for signs." Now, I'll admit, alarm bells did ring in my head, but I immediately pushed them aside. I thought maybe Zara was just being overly protective, or perhaps she had some unresolved issues with Olivia. Besides, I trusted Olivia. Our love story felt too real, too raw to be tainted by whatever Zara was hinting at. I gave Zara a tight smile and nodded, saying, "Thanks for the concern, but I trust Olivia with all my heart." Zara just looked at me with sad eyes, as if she wished she could say more but was bound by some unspoken promise. That night, as I lay in bed next to Olivia, her rhythmic breathing lulling me to sleep, I couldn't shake off Zara's words, but every time doubt crept in, I'd brush it away. Love, after all, was about trust, right? But Reddit, as you'll come to see, Those words planted a seed that would grow into an overhanging cloud of doubt. So, Reddit, the thing about trust is that once there's even a tiny crack in its foundation, everything else seems a little off-kilter. I hate to admit it, but those words from Zara, they stuck. And perhaps it was that whisper of doubt that made me notice things I would have otherwise overlooked. Fast forward a few weeks, and it was a Saturday morning. Alicia had this ritual of heading out to her favorite cafe every Saturday to catch up on her reading. She'd get this massive cup of chai latte, immerse herself in a book, and just escape for a while. I'd often teased her about her sacred weekend ritual, but deep down, I loved how passionate she was about her little routines. That morning, she left her bag on the kitchen table in her hurry. She called out, laughing, "If I forget my head one day, could you remember to pack that for me too?" I remember laughing at her adorable clumsiness. After she left, I decided to be the good husband and pack up her essentials, her wallet, her book, and her favorite pen. But as I was doing so, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic at the bottom of her bag. I pulled out a shimmering necklace. It was delicate, with a sparkling pendant that had an intricate design I didn't recognize. It was beautiful, but it was also entirely unfamiliar. I had never seen it on Alicia, and I certainly hadn't gifted it to her. My first thought, maybe it was a family heirloom or something she'd bought recently. Later that evening, as we settled in with some takeaway and a movie, I casually brought it up. "Hey, I found this necklace in your bag. It's pretty. New?" She looked momentarily taken aback and then replied, "Oh, that? It's from my aunt. She gave it to me last week when I visited her." She quickly took it from my hand and set it aside. But, Reddit, something felt off. It was in the split second of hesitation before she answered. Or maybe the way she avoided eye contact just then. Or maybe it was my now slightly suspicious mind overanalyzing. But it felt like there was something she wasn't telling me. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I told myself Zara's words were just playing tricks on my mind, and there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for the necklace. Yet, as the night wore on and as Alicia snuggled up to me, the weight of that necklace felt like an anchor, pulling me down into a sea of doubt. All right, Reddit, things started spiraling from here, and I felt like I was in one of those mystery thriller movies. In the days following the necklace incident, I tried to get back to our normal rhythm. We laughed, made plans, even talked about taking a trip to the Highlands together. But every so often, I'd catch Olivia looking distant, lost in thought. I chalked it up to stress or maybe some issues at her work. We all have those moments, right? One night, we were curled up on our couch watching some cheesy rom-com. We were sharing a blanket, and Alicia had her phone next to her on the couch. As the movie played, I noticed her phone lighting up repeatedly. Buzz. Pause. Buzz again. Now, Alicia's popular, and her phone's almost always buzzing. But that night, every time it did, she would subtly shift her position, ensuring the screen stayed hidden from my view. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the movie, but it was like a mosquito in a quiet room, impossible to ignore. Then, during a particularly quiet scene in the movie, it buzzed again, lighting up bright enough for me to catch a glimpse. A message from Elle that read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." My heart sank. The way it was written, it wasn't just a casual meetup. There was intimacy in those words. And who was Elle? None of her close friends had names starting with that letter. As casually as I could muster, I asked, "Who's texting you this late?" She glanced at her phone and quickly replied, "Oh, just some work stuff. You know how it is." But she didn't open the message. Instead, she turned off her phone screen and snuggled closer to me. Sleep was elusive that night. Every worst-case scenario played out in my mind. Was it a coworker? An old flame? The unknowns were eating at me. But more than anything, it was the secrecy, the hiding. If it was innocent, why not just tell me? The next morning, she was gone early, leaving a note about an early work meeting. All day, I was restless, debating whether to confront her or to let it go. By evening, I decided that trust was key, and I'd been acting like a crazy, paranoid husband. Hey Reddit, the rabbit hole just kept getting deeper. Here's where the roller coaster took another steep dive. It was on a Thursday afternoon when I met up with my mate, Theo, for a pint at our locale pub. We'd been friends since high school, and he'd recently moved to London for work. He was back in Edinburgh for a few days, and we were catching up on life, work, and all the usual banter. About halfway through our second pint, Theo, with a hesitant look, asked, "John, is everything okay with you and Alicia?" I remember frowning, slightly tipsy, and replied, "Yeah, mate, why?" Theo took a deep breath. "Look, I might be wrong and I don't want to cause any trouble, but I thought I saw Olivia at King's Cross Station in London last Tuesday. She was with some guy, tall, dark-haired, looked a bit like a model. They seemed close." My heart started racing. Olivia hadn't mentioned going to London. In fact, she'd told me she had meetings in Birmingham that day. I tried to keep my composure. "Theo, are you sure it was her? King's Cross is always packed. Could have been anyone." Theo looked uncomfortable. I mean, I wasn't spying or anything, just waiting for my train. But yeah, pretty sure it was her. She had that unique pendant around her neck, the one you found in her bag. I took a deep breath. My mind was racing. Was Theo mistaken? But the mention of the necklace made it hard to believe it was just a coincidence. I finished my drink and headed home, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I decided to confront Alicia about it. As I stepped into our apartment, she greeted me with her usual bright smile, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "How was drinks with Theo?" she asked casually. Without skipping a beat, I blurted out, "Were you in London last Tuesday?" She looked taken aback. "No, I was in Birmingham for meetings, remember? Why?" "Theo said he saw you at King's Cross with some guy." Alicia laughed, but there was an edge to it. Theo must have been mistaken. I was nowhere near London. Maybe he saw someone who looked like me. I wanted to believe her. I desperately did. But the lies, the necklace, the texts, everything piled up, making it hard to see through the fog of doubt. She must have noticed the skepticism on my face because she came over, held my face, and said, "John, you trust me, right?" And read it as much as I wanted to scream yes. All I managed was a nod, while my insides continued their turmoil. The journey from total trust to total doubt is a short one, and I was now at a crossroads, wondering which path to take. All right, Reddit, buckle up because this chapter in our saga, it's wild. It was on a sunny Saturday morning, almost deceptively peaceful given the storm that was brewing inside our relationship. I was tidying up the study, clearing out old papers and random junk we'd accumulated over the years. In my quest for order, I opened a drawer that was Alicia's domain, mostly filled with her stuff, things she'd pick up, mean to use, and then forget. Amidst the collection of pens, old receipts, and miscellaneous knickknacks, I spotted a folded paper that looked distinctly like a hotel booking confirmation. Curiosity piqued, and yes, I know, perhaps it was wrong to snoop. I opened it up. It was a reservation for the Ritz in London, a luxurious suite, for a weekend, under Alicia's name. My heart raced, memories of Theo's sighting in London flooding back. This was evidence, wasn't it? Or was I jumping to conclusions? I needed answers. That evening, over dinner, I slid the confirmation across the table. "Found this today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Planning a trip to London?" Alicia's eyes widened momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, that. It's a surprise for Zara's birthday. I wanted to treat her to a fancy weekend. You know, girls' trip kind of thing." Remember Zara? The friend who'd warned me about Alicia? This didn't make any sense. If Zara felt Alicia was hiding something from me, why would she be planning a luxurious weekend away with her? "Alicia, why didn't you tell me? And why would you take Zara to the Ritz? Seems excessive?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "I just wanted it to be a surprise for everyone. And after everything that's happened recently, I thought Zara and I could use some bonding time." Reddit, the stories weren't adding up. Here was my wife, spinning what seemed like tales right in front of me. My trust was on thin ice, and the weight of all these secrets threatened to break it completely. I tried to push the doubts aside, hoping there was some grain of truth in her words. But the idea of my Olivia at the Ritz with someone who wasn't me painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Would I ever find out the truth behind all these half-told tales? Reddit. I knew I had to confront Zara. If there was even a sliver of truth in Olivia's story, Zara would be my ticket to clarity. But if Olivia was lying, well, Zara had already warned me once, hadn't she? I gave Zara a ring, and we decided to meet at this quiet little cafe in Edinburgh, the kind of place where conversations felt private even amidst the clatter of cups and saucers. As I walked in, I spotted Zara by the window. Her expression was one of surprise mixed with concern. I took a deep breath and walked over. Zara wasted no time. "John, why did you want to meet? Is everything okay with Olivia?" Hesitating, I showed her the hotel booking confirmation. "Olivia told me she booked this for your birthday, a girl's trip to the Ritz. Is it true?" Zara's eyes went wide, genuine shock registering on her face. "John, I have no idea what you're talking about. My birthday isn't even around this date, and I haven't planned any trips with Olivia." My heart sank. Another lie. But Olivia said. Zara cut me off, her voice soft. "John, I warned you about Olivia. I've been noticing her acting strange lately, distancing herself, making excuses, always on her phone. I thought it was just stress or work, but now I'm genuinely worried." The weight of everything hit me. Theo's sighting, the texts, the necklace, and now this. Each lie was a dagger, slowly piercing the trust I once had in Olivia. "Zara, what do you think is going on?" She sighed deeply, looking out the window. "I wish I knew, John, but something's definitely up." As we parted ways, Zara hugged me, whispering, "Find out the truth, John. For both your sakes." Walking home, the city of Edinburgh, which once felt like a haven for our love story, now felt like a labyrinth with secrets lurking in every corner. But one thing was clear. I was determined to find my way out and uncover the truth about Olivia's web of lies. All right, Reddit, if you thought this journey was a roller coaster before, you're in for a shocker now. Hold on to your hats. I made up my mind to get to the bottom of this. No more doubts, no more second guessing. I had to see for myself. So, I decided to surprise Olivia during her supposed girls' trip to the Ritz. If she was indeed there with Zara, I'd apologize, tell her it was a romantic gesture gone wrong, and make amends. If not, well, I needed to know the truth. I took an early train to London, my thoughts racing with every passing landscape. Arriving at the Ritz, the opulence and grandeur of the place hit me. Was this the setting for Olivia's secrets? Taking a deep breath, I approached the front desk, hoping to come up with a believable excuse for them to tell me Olivier's room number. But, as luck would have it, I didn't need one. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of her in the hotel bar, laughing, her hair dancing around her face. But it wasn't Zara sitting across from her. It was a man. Tall, dark-haired, with a familiarity that tugged at my memory. As I inched closer, the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. That man was Lucas, my long-lost brother who had taken off years ago to travel the world, leaving his past behind. We had lost touch, and my last memory of him was as a free-spirited teenager, not the polished man in front of me. The laughter, the touching of hands, the shared glances. It wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. My heart ached. Betrayal from a partner is one thing, but from family, it's a wound that cuts deep. Retreating to a quiet corner, I watched them for what felt like hours, trying to process the scene unfolding in front of me. Questions clouded my mind. How did they meet? How long had this been going on? Why Lucas? I felt lost, a stranger in a city and a life I thought I knew. Drowning in emotions and the sheer weight of the situation, I retreated from the Ritz, leaving behind two people who meant the world to me, their world now intertwined in ways I could never have imagined. Reddit. I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. The combined sting of betrayal from your partner and your own flesh and blood is something indescribable. But here I was, ready to face it head on. After leaving the Ritz, my steps had taken me to a solicitor's office. Driven by raw emotion, I had divorce papers drawn up immediately. It felt impulsive, rash even, but in that moment, it was the only tangible action that seemed to provide some semblance of control over the spiraling chaos. With the papers in hand, I headed back to the Ritz. I was a man on a mission, to confront and to close this chapter of my life. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted closure. Entering the bar once more, I spotted them still there, engrossed in their world. The weight of the papers in my hand felt both heavy and liberating. Summoning all the strength I had left, I marched up to them. Without a word, I slammed the divorce papers onto their table, breaking the intimate bubble they were in. The sharp noise drew startled looks from nearby patrons. Alicia's eyes widened in horror. "John, what's this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. Lucas looked up, his face pale, guilt evident in his eyes. "John, let me explain," he began, but I raised a hand to stop him. "There's nothing to explain," I said coldly. "I saw everything I needed to." Alicia's eyes filled with tears. "John, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. I was lost. I was lonely. It wasn't supposed to happen." Tears streamed down her face, but they no longer had the power to move me. "You were lost?" I said, voice dripping with bitterness. "Seems like you found your way pretty easily to Lucas." Lucas, always the smooth talker, tried to intervene. "John, we didn't plan for this, it just happened." But I was done. Done with the lies, the deceit, and the heartbreak. "Save it," I spat. "You both deserve each other." Turning on my heel, I walked away from the devastation I'd left behind. The cacophony of the bustling city outside mirrored the chows in my mind. But amidst it all, a quiet resolve began to take shape. I would rebuild, rediscover myself, and move forward from this pain. Read it. It's hard to put into words the emotions that course through you when the two people you trust the most betray you. It feels like drowning, like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But as I left the Ritz that day, I also left behind the chains of betrayal, ready to embark on the journey of healing. All right, Reddit. Here's the final chapter of this painful saga. Brace yourselves. The cold London air felt sharp against my skin as I left the Ritz. The city lights, which once represented dreams and possibilities, now only cast shadows of doubt and pain. Each step took me further from the life I had known, the love I had felt, and the trust I had so effortlessly given. As the tube whisked me away, flashes of the past haunted me. Our first meeting in the rain-soaked streets of Edinburgh, the warmth of Alicia's embrace, Lucas's infectious laughter from our childhood, memories that were now tainted, forever altered by betrayal. Reaching the station, I sat on a bench, watching the world go by in a blur. Strangers rushed past, each with their own stories, their own pain. And it made me realize, no matter how unique our stories are, we're all bound by the threads of love, trust, and, inevitably, heartbreak. Tears welled up, blurring my vision. I wasn't crying just for the love lost or the betrayal. It was the sheer unexpectedness of it all. The abrupt realization that life could take such a cruel turn without warning. With a heavy heart, I boarded a train heading north, away from London. I didn't have a destination in mind, but that didn't matter. I needed to be away, to find a place where memories wouldn't haunt every corner. Hours turned into days, the rhythmic chugging of the train, the changing landscapes outside, the kindness of strangers. They all became a balm to my wounded soul. Slowly, the tight knot in my chest began to loosen. I finally alighted in Manchester, a city I had no connections with, a blank canvas. It felt right. Here, amidst the red-bricked buildings and bustling streets, I would rebuild. Not to forget, but to carry forward, bearing the scars of my past, yet not letting them define me. So, here I am, Reddit, sitting in a small cafe in Manchester, writing this out, sharing my story with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I've learned that life is unpredictable. It throws curveballs when you least expect them. But in the face of heartbreak, all we can do is pick up the pieces and keep moving forward. Thanks for listening. It's not the ending I had hoped for, but it's the one I've got, and maybe, just maybe, that's okay.